Now, backbench MPs have failed in their attempt to force a vote on the government's plan to cut the international aid budget. But although he ruled the rebel amendment out of order, Speaker Lindsay Hoyle demanded the government should allow the House of Commons a vote on whether aid spending should be allowed to go below the legally defined level of 0.7% of GDP. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, a couple of hours from now, we could have been looking at the first defeat of this government since Boris Johnson got his 80-strong majority in December 2019. The leader of the rebels, the Tory rebels, said he thought he could potentially defeat the government quite comfortably. He had so many rebels. We won't get that because the Speaker felt that the amendment that was there just didn't have enough to do with the bill that it was amending, and so was outside the rules. And that leaves a whole load of Tory MPs seething and looking for another way to affect government policy. Tomorrow the Speaker's going to give them an emergency debate. That gives them an opportunity to vent their anger, but not an opportunity for much else. You've got a flavour in this exchange in the House of Commons how that anger is going to be expressed. The leader of the rebels, Andrew Mitchell, a former aid secretary himself, trying to put pressure on the government over the fact that the G7 leaders, international leaders, are turning up here next week, and what the government is doing won't look good in front of them.
Mr. Speaker, in the week of the British chairmanship of the G7, the government's failure to address this issue will indisputably mean that hundreds of thousands of avoidable deaths will result. It is already attracting criticism from all round the other members of the G7.
I share the House's frustration. It is quite right that this House should not continue to be taken for granted. We are the elected members. This House should be taken seriously, and the government should be accountable here.
Well, you get the flavour there of how the Speaker shares those rebels' anger that the government has not put a major change in government policy in front of the House of Commons for a vote. He'd like to help them find a way of overcoming that, a meaningful vote that actually could change government policy, but neither of them have found that yet. As for that G7 that Andrew Mitchell was talking about there, you get a flavour talking to people around Whitehall that maybe the Prime Minister is going to lean in a bit to the rebels' argument at the G7 and announce that an awful lot of surplus vaccines will go to poorer countries from Britain, and that the cost of that exercise will not come out of the shrunken aid budget. But fundamentally at the heart of all this, although the government says it's all about good housekeeping, I haven't spoken to a minister or a former minister who doesn't think this is about politics. There are some voters out there who like the idea of charity beginning at home.
Gary Gibbon.